Thanks for coming to see me talk and not Kip Anderson. The guy's not any good. So my talk's going to be about effective advocacy with films. Well, there's a lot of people who are really excited to come up to Kip and I say, oh my gosh, I have this film I want to make, or you guys should make this film about X. And that's great. People should be excited. Film is an amazing way to influence change around the world. For myself, film is one of the reasons why I changed my lifestyle, and the reason why I got into film was because it was what has affected me on such a deep level. But unfortunately, having the motivation to make a film doesn't mean you're necessarily going to make a great film. And unfortunately, we've seen a lot of activists who have amazing heart, but haven't taken the time to learn the skills necessary to actually make a watchable film. So what this talk is really to encourage people to step up their game when it comes to making films and to raise the bar. We tend to have films that fellow vegans will watch or people within our community will watch, but it's much harder to get people outside of our community or outside our movement to watch. So that's what this presentation is about. If you have questions at any point during it, definitely raise your hand, and if I catch you, do that question. So I'm going to cover tools, skills, and stories, and the different stages of making a film. There is pre-production, production, and post-production. So your pre-production, I think, is really the most important part. In pre-production, you have to plan out your story. And a lot of people think that with a documentary, well, you just shoot and shoot and shoot, and then you find your story afterwards. And that is one way to make a film, but that is also one way to spend 6 or 7 years editing footage that no one will ever see. So it's really, if you want to make a film effective and you want to use as few resources as possible, plan out your film as if it was a narrative. So you have the subject, you have your story, you have whatever issue you want to raise attention about. Figure out what that is, and then figure out why would you want to watch a film about that? And then why would anyone want to watch a film about that? So you have an issue, dog meat trade. That's a compelling issue right there. But how do you make a 90-minute film about that? Or you have an issue of rainforest destruction. Okay, great, totally compelling issue, but where's the story? And so with Cowspiracy, for example, we used my co-director Kip Anderson following his journey. So you have this person you can identify with, and you can follow through the whole process, and you can see yourself in them. Someone who leads you on that whole journey. So using narrative is a great way to do that. Or finding elements that are going to invoke real emotion. So again, planning that from the beginning, I think, is the really important part. That'll also make, when you start to shoot, you write out your whole film, first act, second act, and third act. Look into screenwriting. What do narrative films actually use? And they use a model. It's a 3-act model. It's been around for 3,000 years. It works because that's what we're accustomed to, but it's also get people to go on some sort of emotional transformation. Once you have that all written out, it's a lot easier to figure out your budget, because people ask all the time, well, how much does it cost to make a film? Well, you can, who here has a camera that's able to shoot HD video? Right, everybody should, because pretty much everybody's got a smartphone, right? And they all shoot HD video. So you can make a movie on no money, just with your phone. You can literally edit everything on your phone. It's not necessarily going to be the best film, but you can do it. But you could also say, hey, if we're going to make a film about Amazonia, it's going to cost X amount in planes, we're going to have to be there for 6 months, on and on and on. So again, planning every aspect of your film, what you want your final film to look like, to sound like, to feel like, you can figure out your budget then. And then it comes down to selecting the gear and crew to go with that. And really, your budget's going to decide everything. It'll decide what your production looks like. It'll decide what gear you choose to use. Here's one that I focus on. I'm the director of photography for Cowspiracy and our new film, What the Health, and Turlock, and every film that I've worked on, I've been the director of photography because that's what I'm interested in. So this talk is going to be a little bit more gear focused because that's what I'm into. Cameras, audio, stabilizers, and computers. Oftentimes when people talk about documentaries, it's really focused on just the camera. Oh, well, what camera are you using? What camera are you using? What's the best camera? And cameras are a huge important part, but they are just one part of it. There's three different types of cameras that people are using for documentaries. There's still cameras, DSLRs or SLR cameras, professional cinema cameras, and then camcorders. DSLRs are great. Cowspiracy was shot on 5D Mark II DSLR. It's a relatively affordable still camera that shoots HD video. The benefits of shooting with DSLRs is that you have full manual control of your camera. And a lot of people want to just get a camera and shoot and do everything automated. And if you go that route, you're going to lose the professional quality. So shooting manual is really important in my opinion. Three cameras that I think are really effective and useful tools for filmmaking: A7S Mark II, the Panasonic GH4, and the Canon 5D Mark III. You can get all these cameras. The prices are for new, but you can get them used for usually about 25 to 50% cheaper. I recommend buying used. All the gear that I buy is used. One, you're not supporting the corporation directly who manufactured it because they may not have the most ethical business practices or environmental practices. And two, it's better to reuse always instead of buying new. The downside, which I really see as a plus, is that when you buy a DSLR, you have to buy lenses. Lenses, I think, will really determine how your film looks. When we see really beautiful cinematic images like this one, what makes it beautiful for a lot of us is the shallow depth of field, because it really more emulates our own vision. When we put something close to our eyes, background goes completely out of focus, and that's what a fast lens will do. So buying fast lenses, and a fast lens is any lens that has a low f-stop number. So for example, f1.4 is going to give you a really beautiful cinematic image compared to f5, f6, or f12. Really is going to look a lot more flat. I do apologize if this gets too technical, but I think this is an important part because that's what people ask me all the time. They say, well, what gear should I get? It's like, well, learn about this. And again, figure out what actually makes a beautiful image. Lens selections, you can literally, we shot Cowspiracy with three lenses, 24, 50, and an 85 millimeter. The focal length, which is the 14 millimeters, that's your focal length, is how much of the image you're going to see. So the smaller that number, the wider the image, the higher the number, the tighter the image. And again, going for a fast f-stop. You can also shoot with a relatively cheap zoom lens, but again, you're going to be losing cinematic quality. And then that's really what I think DSLRs and using decent lenses, you could buy 5 lenses in a package for $2,000, which is a good amount of money, but relatively speaking, that's really cheap for getting quality lenses. Fully manual lenses too. Again, I think we have to get away from, if we want to make decent films and artistic films, get away from anything that's automatic shutter, automatic aperture, automatic focus, everything manual, because that's what you're going to want to have full control over every aspect and not leave it up to technology to decide for you. If you have the budget, professional cinema cameras are awesome, but they vary in cost dramatically. So most professional cinema cameras start at about $20,000. So for the vast majority of activists, it's totally outside of our realm and scope. If you do have a budget and it's your first film, I don't recommend using a professional cinema camera. I recommend hiring somebody who has experience using a professional cinema camera because it will make your life a lot easier. Downside to using these cameras, though, is that they shoot massive files. So you're going to end up having a huge amount of data. So shooting an hour's worth of footage will be a terabyte of information versus, this DSLR will shoot an hour worth of footage on 60 gigs. So your budget has to go up dramatically. A lot of people want to shoot their documentaries on camcorders. Don't shoot your documentaries on a camcorder. Camcorders are great if you want to shoot home movies, and you can do amazing films with camcorders. But as far as your quality and the cinematic value of the film, camcorders really aren't going to deliver. They're designed, they have really small sensors oftentimes. The smaller the sensor size, the less cinematic the image is going to look. Bigger sensor, a full frame sensor, will give you more of a professional look. So at all costs, I would recommend not shooting on a camcorder. I would encourage people rather to shoot on an iPhone than shoot on a camcorder for the most part. They also tend to have fixed lenses, so it's one lens and that's everything. You can't control anything past that. The poor stepchild in filmmaking is audio. Audio is so important. You can get an audience to watch a bad image. They'll watch grainy, shaky, horrible, dark, any sort of garbage image. But if it's bad audio, you'll lose people immediately. They won't pay attention. They won't be able, it's just something about it that messes with us. So putting your time and energy into just learning about audio. Always having 3 setups. You have a shotgun mic that's getting the room. You have wired mics for your interviewees or your subject, and then dual recording system. So you have a dual recording system, allows you to have backups because you're always going to have issues. Something's always going to go wrong, and it's going to be the most important part of your film is when it goes wrong. So you want to have redundancy. So you're going to get that interview with the person you never thought you'd ever get, and their mic's going to die. And so you're going to be dependent on something else, or you're going to have a card corruption issue. There's going to be something. So redundancy is a big part of it. So you're recording on a separate recorder, and you're also recording into your cameras as well. Again, this is just a total overview and crash course, because I think what I want to do is for people to understand that these are relatively simple issues, relatively simple concepts, but there's so much to always learn, to constantly be learning. This is my setup. Well, I have it looks ridiculously complicated, but dual system. So I have a H4n audio recorder, which is at the top, sticking at the top, where I run all my mics into. But I also run a splitter so I can run into the camera, shotgun mic, and then a wireless receiver. So that I've always got at least 3 sources of audio. And that way, when you're mixing in post-production, you have the choice of whatever quality you need, or if something goes wrong. When it comes to stabilization, tripods, I see a lot of people say, I spent $600 on this tripod and it doesn't do what I want it to do, and it's because they bought a photo tripod and not a video tripod. You're going to buy stabilizers, make sure you buy a quality video tripod head, which will be a fluid head. They're going to be bigger, they're going to be heavier, they're going to be able to give you the cinematic look you're looking for. Photo head is going to be stationary. It's designed to set up the camera, lock it down, and leave it. Big thing. If you want to spend a bunch more money, you can also go with motorized gimbals, which gives you a really cinematic look. And these are Steadicam devices that use brushless motors to stabilize the camera. You can get those from $1,000 to $10,000, depends on what your budget is, but definitely worthwhile. Computer is obviously you're going to need necessary for editing any sort of film. Getting a computer that I can actually edit a film is important. So most of the time, if we buy a laptop or even a lot of PCs or desktop Macs, they're not going to have the necessary RAM and processors to handle the footage that you're trying to send into them. So getting a decent computer setup. This is all basic information. If you want to take a photo of it, if you're going to be buying a computer, this is kind of minimum requirements. I don't have any professional training in filmmaking. I didn't go to school for it. Actually didn't even go to high school. I'm a 6th grade dropout. So everything that I've learned on filmmaking has really come from YouTube. It's YouTube University. If you have any question about literally anything, just YouTube it and type in tutorial, and someone who has taken the time to tell you how to do it. I mean, I've learned things like how to take apart a lens and put it back together, how to clean sensors, how to run programs, everything just from YouTube. A lot of people will also say to me, hey, well, should I go to school? There's a course I'm going to go into to learn this. You know, I just went into $50,000 in debt to go to film school. If that's the route you want to go, you can do that, but you don't have to. Another big part of it is just watch a lot of films. I think it's underrated and also can feel like not a value of your time. But if you want to make films, spend the time just watching as many documentaries as you can. And when you watch the film, don't watch it just for the subject matter. Sometimes I'll watch films and just turn off the volume entirely so I can't tell what the film's about, just to see how long the shots are taking. You know, the shot stays up for 3 seconds or 10 seconds. You know, what's the framing of the shot? What's the color of the shot? What are the motions? And just figure out why you like it. So take your favorite film, watch it without the sound, and see why you like it. What's beautiful about it, and then emulate that. I think that's really probably the best thing that we can do to make cinematic, powerful films, is to emulate films that have moved us, and not just on subject matter, but on quality. Again, I think we have an obligation, if we're using films for activism, we have to raise the bar. We can't be making films for our community. We've got to make films for the outside world. Looking at an image, this is a big part of, I think, that's overlooked and oftentimes put as a backseat with filmmaking, is color. This image, this is one of my favorite films called The Imposters, an amazing documentary, highly recommend it. But look at the color of a film. Look at the color of documentaries, and then compare the color of narrative films. And then look at your favorite narrative films and pay attention to the colors. What are the darks? The darks are going to be blues or purple tints to them. They're not going to be just straight black. Look at the highlights. The highlights are going to be just straight white. They're going to have a tint of yellow to them, a tint of orange. And just pay attention to that and see what kind of mood that plays. I think it's a huge part of making a emotionally compelling film. So another shot of dramatic lighting and color. You notice in the color in this, projector doesn't necessarily show it that well, but the whites are really yellow. And then the darks have a lot of green and a lot of blue in them. And that's going to make for a much more emotional, dramatic image. Storytelling is really, I think, a big part, again, going back to, you can have a film that isn't doing much as far as visually. The audio could be bad, the music could be terrible, could have, the quality just be really bad. But if you have a compelling story, it'll pave the way for everything. So when you are editing the film, again, constantly ask yourself, who am I making this film for? And think about what they would think when they watched it. So, for example, Cowspiracy was a film that was made for the general public. So you actually don't hear the word vegan in the film until an hour and 10 minutes in. No mention of the word vegan, because we know that if we put vegan or plant-based as a solution 20 minutes into the film, well, that's where most people are going to unplug. They're not going to watch any further. So just remember what your audience, your intended audience, is really going to be. Showing disturbing footage first thing off in your film is not necessarily going to get a lot of people to watch it. And then just remember too, if, for example, if you're advocating for animals, think about what it was like before you changed your lifestyle. And if you were born into that, well then it's a different experience. But just again, remember, put yourself in the place of the audience. I think that's the big part of it. If you have questions, you can, go ahead.
I wondered if you had any suggestions for lighting, besides using natural light, and using it sort of acceptable in terms of budget?
Yeah. So with Cowspiracy, we used no external lights. Everything was natural light and existing light. And if you shoot with a really flat color profile, which is a profile that has really low desaturated, unsharpened, low contrast, it gives you a lot of room in post-production. So it's a really ugly looking gray, flat image. But in post-production, you have a ton of room to play with it. So you can control your lighting in that way. So you can literally shoot an interview in light like this, which is not really compelling, not really flattering. But if you shoot really flat, then you can bump the highlights, you can make it really dramatic, you can change the color. LED lights are great. You can buy really affordable panel LEDs that run off of batteries. And LEDs is probably the best way to go today. You can use tungsten lights or compact fluorescents, but they're just bigger and heavier, require way more energy, and really don't produce that much better. You can actually, even though, buy just any sort of utility light from Home Depot, $10 light, and use those, bounce them off the ceiling, funnel them with paper. You can do a lot. So lighting is a big thing. It definitely is going to control, and that's really in your planning stage, figuring out what you want your film to look like, and that'll decide what kind of lighting setup you want. Yeah.
When you talk about film, I work in television. Are the rules different?
Yeah, so television, everything is the attention span. You don't have 90 minutes for most people. And so production value, too, doesn't have to be as cinematic. Television has much lower standards. There are requirements that you have to shoot in certain codecs. You might have to shoot in, Rec 670, which is a certain format so that the image is broadcast quality. But your storytelling can be way more repetitive. You have to be thinking about the spacing of commercials and how you tell your story and where you're going to repeat issues. And so it's just really just thinking for short attention span. And that is sadly where we're going. The attention span is going down. And like when you look at the statistics for YouTube videos, average YouTube video used to be, successful YouTube videos were like 1.5 minutes, and now I think it's down to 15 seconds or something ridiculous like that. So constantly keeping people re-engaged with the subject is really important, especially with TV.
Is it also hard to crack that market since it's a little bit more films and people tend to seek out and gravitate towards, whereas television, you have to kind of convince a network to play something
Right.
that is controversial and difficult to.
Yeah. So with TV, the traditional route to get a TV program or a series is that you have to get a production company who works with that network to produce your product, to send a pitch, basically. So they'll do your pilot episode or your pilot film, and have something you can show the network, and the network will say, yeah, we're interested in that, and then they'll give you the budget to produce. A lot of networks don't buy films or shows after they've already been produced. They sometimes do, but it's much more common that they want to have a hand in the production.
Has Cowspiracy been played on TV a lot?
No, so Cowspiracy, we signed a distribution deal exclusively with Netflix that prevented us from doing television for the next 1.5 years. But we have an educational edit of the film that comes out this week, which is 43 minutes long. That's for schools, which is technically a different film, so that could potentially be for television as well. Is there another question? Yeah.
How did you get in and have the limited groups that take the responses? How did you get them to allow you to use the cameras?
Yeah, so in Cowspiracy, has everybody here seen Cowspiracy? Oh, not everybody. When we interviewed the organizations, we told them that we're making a film. That was really the in, because Kip had been trying to get interviews with these organizations for 7 years, and they never got back to him. It's finally like, oh, well, if we take cameras in, they're going to talk to us. People ask us, yeah, how did you get them to sign your release waiver after, they look like such idiots in the film? And what we did is that we would get them to sign those releases before we started the interview. So if you're going to be doing a controversial film, definitely get those release waivers up front. That way they can't take it back. So I really only have time for one more question. Yeah.
What are the production costs?
So we don't put that out there because it makes it really challenging for negotiating. I'll give you, so my first feature-length documentary is called Turlock, and it's about the largest farm animal rescue in California history, second largest in U.S. history. It's actually available downstairs. Did that film for $4,000. So you can do a film for next to nothing, but you can also spend $500,000 making a film. It really depends, and it's really, I don't think people should be dissuaded from making a film based off their budget. You can make a decent film with, again, next to nothing. It's just learning your tools, spending the time, educating yourself as much as you can. Working on short films first, I think, is really important. Produce a ton of 10-minute, 15-minute videos on a subject and make those as engaging as possibly can before you try and tackle a feature length. I think that's a big part. It'll also save you a ton of time on editing footage, because you'll say, I didn't use 90% of what I shot. This is what I should be going for. So this is a jam-packed day. There's a ton of stuff going on. Really appreciate you all coming to this first talk. There's food. Definitely get some of the amazing vegan food that's available. And if you're interested in going to someone's talk, get there early, because seating is going to be limited throughout the day. So Kip and I will both be available pretty much most of the day. So if you see us and you want to talk, definitely come grab us. So thank you again so much.